ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Let's try that again. Welcome to this week's edition of Disloyal Idiots, a Fans First Sports Network podcast. I decided to mute everybody. I'm Steve Haller. We're working with technical difficulties already, but the Orange have scored 100 points in 2 games, and we're here to talk about it. We do still have an APB out on Andy Pregler. However, we did get Mike Ostrowski to come in and pinch hit for him. So joining me are Mike and Christian de Guzman as always. What's going on, guys?
I was waiting to see how long that took you to figure out.
Well, my problem is I'm looking at the waveform for my recording and everything was fine because it's all local. So
if you're listening on your podcast provider of choice, this is going to sound really weird. But on the live stream, hi, we have sound working.
Oh god, that's great. So here we are.
Guess what? We know technology.
Yep.
Kind of, sort of.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Like Syracuse kind of knows an offense.
They know parts of an offense?
Maybe. The other part of the offense is yet to be determined for a variety of reasons.
By that, you mean my favorite part of the offense?
Well, we'll get to that.
For those the who most do important not part of an offense?
Well, you know.
Yep. For those who don't know Steve's particular area of expertise on this podcast and website that we write on, we will get to the big boys in the trenches in just a little bit. Before we let's talk about what just happened this past Saturday. Syracuse did win 48-7 over Western Michigan. This is the first time Western Michigan has been held to single-digit points against Syracuse in its third ever meeting. The first 2 were under Tim Lester, so clearly the Broncos needed Tim Lester to at least have a fighting chance in this game.
Well, those XFL quarterbacks really come in handy.
I mean, yes. Mike, you were there at this game, and it kind of felt like it might be scary after the first possession. And I think a lot of people in the Dome felt like this was going to be a lot scarier than it really was, especially after the first possession of that game.
Yeah, you could hear a pin drop in there at that point, and even up in the press box, it was kind of a feeling of, what the heck did we just watch? Are we at the right game? We did find out pretty soon that yes, this was Syracuse and Western Michigan, and yes, the Syracuse offense woke up after that. But we were warned that Western Michigan is a good running team. I don't think we expected them to show it that fast.
Yeah. Well, they were a good running team for one run.
Right. So I was also there. I was as a fan, which is weird to do after so many years of being in the box. But the I walked in. I had my son's birthday was this past weekend, so we were at his birthday party, and then showed up to the game slightly late. And I walked in, and I'm like, "What?"
Donald Glover meme with pizza box.
100%. Just walked in. I'm like, "Oh, things are on fire. Cool, great." So apparently we turned things around slightly, seeing that was the last points they scored, but problems were had.
It was good to see. It was also good to see that the Tony White era of defensive adjustments carried over into the Rocky Long era of defense, because after that 75-yard rush on the second play of scrimmage from Western Michigan, Western Michigan was held to exactly -3 yards of rushing. Yes, that, carries on a couple of sacks here and there, but still the point still stands that Syracuse did pretty well to stuff the run and in general just stuff the defense as a whole. I guess we'll talk about that first, because it's kind of like if we're pinpointing positives, it's that yes, the Rocky Long defense looks pretty dang good. Yes, it's only against Colgate and Western Michigan, but it turns out if you bring in the person who created the defense that a lot of college teams are modeling their defense after, it's probably a good idea that, your defense is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, is that how that works? You bring in the guy that knows what he's doing, and he still knows what he's doing.
Apparently.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. And it's definitely a good thing to see, because one of the big reasons why Syracuse went on the losing streak that it did towards the end of the season last year was because of the run defense. And yes, of course, that 75-yard run wasn't exactly the most enticing thing to see from Syracuse. But afterwards, the trenches batted down. The running lanes were blocked off and cut off. And while you're probably not going to see a offense that is of the weaker caliber like Colgate and Western Michigan were, it's still a good sign to see that this defense is living up to the billing in terms of at least the front end of the ones on the depth chart.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know how to put words to what I was going for. But yeah. We're doing good on the speaking front today.
All right, I'll chime in. Hey, sorry.
No,
I
it's all
think
good.
also a good thing to point out this game, and like we said, granted, it's Colgate, Western Michigan, not exactly an SEC outfit out here, but second straight game with a turnover, second straight game with a pick six for a defense that it's been a couple of years since they really had forced consistent turnovers. I think that's a very good sign to see early on, where they going back to week one, where Christian, you pointed out how the corners are actually pressing at the line. They're willing to be a little more aggressive and not just play soft zone. I'm very pleased with that myself. I don't know about you guys, but
I was going to say you said the
sigh
words
of
that made Christian.
sigh of relief is more the right words instead of pleased. But it's still, and while those are good things to see, I will say it's still kind of jury's out on this secondary, because it just hasn't been tested, just in general, in these first two games. There haven't been like a lot. Both quarterbacks that Colgate and Western Michigan threw out, at least in the ones on their depth chart, aren't the type of quarterbacks that they're not Hudson Card. We're not going to see him in Colgate and Western Michigan, and so it's going to be a very different style of quarterbacking that Syracuse is going to face coming into the Purdue game coming up next week. So while the turnovers are nice to see, the first real test for the secondary, and you can say, I guess, the defense in general, is coming next week.
Yeah, and that's, part of what when I was stumbling earlier, I had been pulling up the box score and looking at what happened for total passing yards for Western Michigan, and they finished the game with 220 yards in the air, 318 total offense, so under 100 yards rushing. But they're even against what should be a very subpar team, still threw for a decent amount.
I will say most of those came at the end of that second half drive.
Yeah.
That 2-minute drive at the end of the second half that ultimately ended in the Simmons pick six.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, every single other drive was pretty buck standard to what we expected from just a 3-3-5 in general.
Now, that said, a couple of those drives and plays were completely killed not by Syracuse's coverage or not by Syracuse doing anything they should do, but by Western Michigan receivers literally just dropping the ball open in space. And I remember 3 distinct easy first downs that were dropped that way. So
I thought you were going to say the penalties.
Well, no, that's their own animal. Like I don't know if I've given up on harping on penalties at this point.
Let's talk about that.
We will get to that.
No, let's talk about it right now. That was, out of all the Syracuse games I've watched, and it's been a few over the past years as a Syracuse fan, that was probably the longest the first half has ever taken.
Literally 2 hours.
Yeah, I could not believe that it was 4:30 up in the press box before the second quarter, started. And at that point, we're thinking, if we're going to be here this long, first off, we might as well grab second from the media spread. But second off, that whole pace of play thing that we thought was going to happen this year hasn't happened so far.
Well, it's hard to pace play when the teams combined split evenly for 18 penalties. Western Michigan for 99 yards, Syracuse for 72 yards. So we won that battle too by sheer yardage, but both teams committed 9 penalties.
That doesn't count all the offset and declined penalties also, which were plentiful in their number as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of laundry on the field all around, and it was really affecting. Well, I mean, anyone who was at the Dome could see how quickly everything cleared out after the half, and even at the half, it was the students were. It was a mass exodus, and then my seats are right above the student section, so it was like I was chiding Dom, our co-writer on Noons. I was like, "Where'd you guys go? Everybody leave or what?" And it wasn't any different in the normal fan base either. Like everybody just kind of dispersed.
Yeah, the swift answer was yes, everyone left. But it's still a problem that we brought up last week on the pod, continue to bring it up because it's a problem that Dino wants to correct, but hasn't found a way to correct in penalties. So last year, Syracuse was the most penalized team in the FBS. And already things are trending towards that direction, which is not a good sign.
No, not a good sign at all. But, I mean, when you have a 6th year guard that at this point has committed 4 false starts in 2 games, it's probably not a great sign that you're going to correct things.
And now's when we transition into this talk. The offense in general is interesting right now. And it's something that Emily Leckler brought up on Syracuse.com earlier today. If for people who somehow stayed awake during the first half of this game, you might have noticed quickly that Syracuse was throwing the ball a lot more than running the ball. And Emily put out a good theory to say that Syracuse probably right now might not trust its offensive line based on the personnel that it has at its disposal to run block at a level that is suitable for LeQuint Allen to show off his talents. So what we saw was LeQuint Allen run 8 times in the first half, and Garrett Shader drop back to throw 30 times. Excuse me, it's actually 33, but he rushed on 3 attempts. So, what does that mean? Does that mean that Syracuse doesn't trust LeQuint Allen? That's clearly not the case. We saw what happened in the Pinstripe Bowl. I mean, we saw what happened last week. He still got, if I'm correct, I think he got more carries last week. Yeah, he got 16 carries last week against Colgate and only 8 this week. And most of those carries were in goal line situations. He maybe had 3 carries in open field situations. So is the offensive line just not set up for run blocking? And if that, is this the offensive line you want out there pass blocking? Because pass blocking wise, it didn't look that great either. And if you had a quarterback who wasn't as mobile as Garrett Shader is, this might end up looking a lot different in terms of the amount of pressure that Shader received. He ended up with 0 sacks, which is probably more a testament to his mobility than his offensive line keeping him clean. So right now, offensive line is, as we probably correctly assumed going into this year, the biggest worry on this team.
Yeah, I won't disagree. Mike, you got anything before I go on a diatribe?
Go right ahead, man.
Alrighty.
Okay.
All right. So chairs back, lean back. Get the coffee ready.
One thing for you two, actually. what we saw against Western Michigan's an extremely blitz heavy team. Probably, I mean, well over 50% of their snaps, they're bringing somebody extra. And it's extremely high risk, high reward. And someone like Garrett Schrader, who's able to evade pressure, leaves open a lot of those shots down the field for the 10, 15-yard chunks that we were seeing. In doing so, it does, unless, and I haven't had the time to go back and do an actual drive chart either of these first 2 weeks, but in doing so, you've got somebody extra coming that makes it look like the pocket's collapsing or makes it look like something's going haywire, more so than it does. I don't want to comment without knowing what's going on there, but in general, that right side of the line, especially now that we have an additional injury to the offensive line in David Wollabaugh, who went down. Was it end of the first quarter or was it in the second quarter? Either way, first half.
End of the second quarter.
Yeah. He went down. He was the starting right tackle, who we still don't know what in camp was the number one, like what the actual ones were with the line, because everybody's been injured all the time, which I feel like we've heard a lot of times with this offensive line, the Dino Babers era and beyond. Usually you need healthy people to push other larger healthy people around. We seem to not have that.
Wow, what a concept.
I know, it's crazy. It seemed alluded to in the post game, right, Mike, that there may be some returners or some faces coming back.
Yeah, so I talked to Schrader. He said that Kalen Ellis and Joe Moore are both supposed to be back this week, which would be a blessing. But until we actually see them suited up Saturday night in uniform, not street clothes, I'm not exactly holding my breath.
Right.
Oh, right. That's a Saturday night game. Good Lord.
Big Ten Saturday night, baby.
Luckily, it's on NBC and not Peacock.
Big Ten.
Well, it will be on Peacock. It will be on Peacock, but it is also on NBC.
Nice.
Thankfully.
Yeah, not a Peacock exclusive, thankfully.
Yeah. So that'll be, it'll be a test to see who we get back. We've talked about Purdue as kind of one of those bellwether games of who's ready and who's up to 100%. Is there anyone else? We haven't touched on people going down, but is there anyone that's, what is that? Is that what music am I hearing right now?
Some whatever Pittsburgh music you can think of.
We've got Stone Cold Andy Pregler making an appearance here.
Well, now you got to blast Renegade. You got to get some sticks going. Syracuse.
Andy, I changed out of my Steelers stuff for this because I was too embarrassed to wear it after that game.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed I drafted Najee Harris as my first running back.
Okay, one, I could have told you that was a bad idea. Mike could have told you that was a bad idea. Jaylen Warren is the truth. ACC forever. However, yes, the Steelers gear was put back in the laundry hamper and the home field was put back on. And then I remembered I had a nice dinner tonight. No offense to home field, but they should really make a Syracuse polo because then I can wear home field for both casual and fancy. Would like to put that out to Connor. Thank you very much.
Sounds like your dog really likes the smell of your dinner.
She does. So also my dog has this nasty habit of during Syracuse games where Syracuse is blowing out the opponent, being very calm. And then during like stressful games, deciding that she wants all of the attention. So naturally yesterday she was absolutely chill. But
Are you
I have
sure?
this...
I thought it was going to be the opposite, given how, as Steve put it, and I totally agree with him, this was the least convincing 41-point win I've ever seen.
I don't disagree with that to a point. Western Michigan, this is something that I think is kind of interesting about Dino's scheduling, and not to become John Casillo here.
Well, we just did O-line rant, so we're into scheduling rant. You're right.
Here we go. Yeah, there we go. I see natural here. We got this. So early when Babers was hired and when Steve and I were doing this show solo back in the day, thank you to all who were listening then for some reason. One of the things that we talked about was like how Babers and his staff had this fascination with the Midwest, where we were actively trying to recruit out of Ohio and Detroit, a lot of like Michigan, Western Michigan recruits. And so it made sense that we were playing all these MAC teams. Also, I feel like it's partially Dino giving like a little shake to these other schools, being like, look, we will schedule you for our bye game. Syracuse, my current employer, will gladly give you, all of my other friends, millions of dollars to come and lose to us in this game if all goes according to plan. And I actually really liked the MAC setup. I know that John was someone who kind of talked about how Syracuse has to juggle the sweet spot between teams that are going to be a pushover in some regards, so that way we can get the automatic 4 wins for bowl eligibility. But you also want the games to mean something and have something. And the MAC for a while was that like perfect sweet spot. We get into recruiting hotbeds that we are going after. We get an opponent who is, we're going to require 95% effort, maybe not 100%, but it's going to require most of the effort. And man, this Western Michigan team was just not there. After that first drive, I have not seen a team just so thoroughly and utterly mismatched, and yet there's a lot of 1 and 2 star recruits on that team that in older years Syracuse might have been looking at. It just felt like, even though Syracuse didn't have its best game, which is probably the unconvincing part, they didn't need it against Western Michigan, which then brings me around to the question of like, look, I don't love the fact that we're playing Penn State in a home and home. I really don't like the fact that we're going to Tennessee or we're going to play Tennessee in Atlanta in 2 years. Like, I don't think that's the answer here. But this Western Michigan game felt more akin to Colgate than in past years when we played Western Michigan on the road in Kalamazoo with an Eric Dungy at quarterback, and that game felt like a precursor to something important.
I may have the solution for you. A conference named the AAC, ignoring Cincinnati.
Look, I would love a Syracuse-Tulane home and home to pick back up, because the battle of the home field best mascots would be an amazing game to take place every year. An excuse to get me down to Louisiana. But
a lot of Syracuse fans will make that trip.
Yeah.
But I think
For
reasons
one of the things that don't include playing Tulane.
But you look at it like this Purdue game is, we'll get to the Purdue preview in a minute, but like this Purdue game is basically a toss-up according to odds makers. And then the Army game should roll. So Syracuse essentially is only playing one non-conference toss-up game. Going 3-1 in non-conference, really important. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't keep scheduling it that way. It does just feel like, though, the only thing that could have come out of the Western Michigan game was injuries, and the only thing that came out of the Western Michigan game was injuries.
Well, let's get to that, because we already talked about one injury. We didn't talk about the other important injury that probably changes this team. Probably the second or third Syracuse play from scrimmage, Aronde Gadsden gets his ankle rolled on, and he is limps off the field, heads to the locker room, returns to the field on crutches and with a boot on his right ankle. Dino said after the game that, and confirmed reports that Gadsden was already dealing with an ankle problem coming into this game, but it was the other ankle. So Gadsden now has both of his ankles hurting in some capacity. And he has his head in his hands, for those of you who are not watching the live stream right now.
I didn't realize the ankle was a different ankle. I thought it was the same ankle.
Same.
Nope. It is a completely different ankle.
This
And now Syracuse's preseason All-American, one of the only times Syracuse has had a preseason offensive All-American in the 21st century, is now highly questionable. Trademark not included from ESPN. Highly questionable for this Purdue game.
Ow. That's an owie. This is an owie.
So I leave it to you, gentlemen. What now?
Put Gadsden in an ice bath from the waist down and just heal. And in all honesty, at this point, don't play him against Purdue.
If we're not going to play him against Purdue, here's actually my theory. If we're not going to play him against Purdue, The next time I want to see Gadsden on the field is against Virginia Tech.
Okay.
No, I think at this point the Clemson game has fundamentally changed.
Because Charleston Southern played them tight for a quarter and a half?
No, because they don't have an offensive. Their offensive line looks just as strong as our offensive line.
That good, huh?
I'll also make the case that Dable has completely lost that locker room. So that is.
Oh, that's spicy.
The Clemson preview episode is going to be amazing when we all get on here.
Speaking of which, tune back in sometime this week as we will be joining our Fans First Sportsnet brethren from the Purdue side of things for another game preview.
Yeah,
tentatively a Wednesday broadcast, so we'll see. We'll keep you all updated more on that as it comes.
So, going back to the injury at hand, I was personally okay because my favorite player on this team right now, and I've made it abundantly clear, is Isaiah Jones, and he stepped up in when they needed him to, because Jones essentially moved into that slot role that Gadsden was playing. Jones was the Y receiver, or the Z, I guess, in the
right
in the original formation as the second outside wide receiver, with the X being Damian Alford. But he moved into the slot that Gadsden was occupying and performed pretty well, as he clearly and quickly became the number one target for Schrader, because, as we know, Schrader likes to throw over the middle, and big guy over the middle usually means success. And that's what Jones is. A little bit smaller than Gadsden, but similar body type and frame. And he got up and caught a couple of balls, not just this week, but last week as well. And that should bring Syracuse fans a lot of confidence, at least in terms of, if Gadsden can't go, you seem to at least have a competent replacement. And a lot of Syracuse officials, I would say officials, like players and coaches, really liked Jones, especially at the beginning of last season before his season-ending injury in the Purdue game last year. And so to see him now perform, at least in the first two games of the season, looks like, at the very least, you have someone to replace Gadsden. Whether you have someone to replace Jones on the outside is another story. And while, yes, there are people who have shown up, it's still a lot of unproven talent. Because Damian Alford, you know what you're getting from Damian Alford. We know what we're getting from Isaiah Jones. We know what we're getting from Rondé Gadsden. However, there's still I see your puzzled look on your face, Steve. The reason I'm saying this is that there's still a little bit of green, at least in my opinion, on Donovan Brown and Amari Hatcher, who are the other guys that are going to probably replace Jones on the second outside receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And we've only seen Brown in 2 games in significant action, last week and this week. But he hasn't been targeted that much. Yes, he had that fancy 86-yard touchdown run, but hasn't been featured that much. And Hatcher really has only played in cleanup duty at last year on the second string, and this year as the 1.5 option.
Yep. And
so it's going to be interesting to see how those two guys perform once the level of competition theoretically takes a step up.
So a couple things on that. Do we know what we're getting with Alford? Because the last
that is a good point. Damian Alford did do a very good Kadarius Toney impression.
Yeah, I have not seen any complete gator arms maneuvers either. So that's a question mark. Mike, did we hear anything about Pena in the presser?
Nope. I'm guessing it's still going to be a couple weeks. I'll try to find out tomorrow morning, but he was doubtful going into the game. So I'm, in Dino's language, I'm guessing that's still in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's a good half season still.
Yeah,
we've had people that were listed number 1 on the depth chart that didn't play for like 6 weeks. So yeah,
The Gadsden loss is going to sting, and I think it's pretty obvious that he's not going to play against Purdue at this point. As soon as he came out of the locker room with Brad Pike next to him instead of insert random football trainer guy, you knew it was bad because Brad Pike only shows up if it's a big injury. So that was red flag number one. But even if Pena's not there, the one player who really impressed me from this game was Donovan Brown. Donovan Brown showed me a lot of, like, I was excited that he had made the depth chart, not realizing that the Pena injury news was forthcoming. But he is your typical slot receiver. He does the quick little dirty moves in order to get a little bit of space. He has some nice yards after catch potential there. He also is the body type where he can use his size to create some space. And that's the one thing that I have as a question going into this Purdue game is I think objectively Syracuse has better skill position players on both sides of the ball than Purdue has. It's just a matter of size and whether or not Syracuse's players use that size. Like Alford is a great example of a guy who's been bigger than everybody for 3 years, and we've yet to see it actually materialize into something consistent. And I think Donovan Brown is somebody who, in this game against Western Michigan and against Colgate, I saw a guy who's able to consistently use his size to his advantage, and they're going to need to do that against Purdue. And so I would feel a lot better if Pena was back. But I think the drop between between Pena and Brown is way less than the drop between Gadsden and whoever the next primary pass catcher is going to be. Because at this point, I think it's really obvious to say that Gadsden, I don't care if you call him a tight end, you call him a wide receiver, whatever. He is the primary target in Syracuse's passing attack. It's kind of like Travis Kelce with the Chiefs. He's listed as a tight end, but he's really an inside wide receiver. And when he goes down, who is the number two? And how much confidence do you have in that? The Chiefs trusted Kadarius Toney, and it did not end well.
No.
The Syracuse has a lot of other options that they can trust, but I am kind of intrigued to see who that will be because Garrett Schrader has been somebody who over time has proven once he has somebody, he really does not like to move off of that one somebody. And a lot of these two Colgate and Western Michigan games have been spread the ball around. We need you to establish a rapport with somebody else. And Alford dropping a wide open touchdown pass isn't going to build that rapport.
Well, Christian did mention Isaiah Jones, which that seems likely to be the new 1A or new 1, because I don't know if there's really a 1B, but if I would have much rather had both of them out there running routes and catching balls because, well, that's talent. But having Jones out there at least gives us an option. It doesn't leave us completely blank.
There is a third option.
A triple option, if you will.
Could be a triple option. And it's happy you bring up triple option because it does involve running back. Because remember, one of the things we really liked about LaQuinn Allen last year was his ability to receive. And if you're only going to rush him 8 times, you might as well throw to him a couple of times.
Well, and that's one of the things we haven't seen this year at all. So is this part of Dino's cookbook for whatever's happening in West Lafayette, Indiana?
And correct me if I'm wrong or if memory serves me incorrectly, but Beck called the plays on the Pinstripe Bowl also.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So he knows what plays work to draw up success for LaQuinn Allen. And the Minnesota secondary is a lot better than a lot of the secondaries that we're going to face this year.
Yeah.
So again, if you trust your offensive line right now to pass block a lot more than they run block, you might as well have them pass block and have the running back throw a chip and leak out.
Well, that's for one, LaQuinn Allen is a mild step up in pass blocking from the glory that was Sean Tucker attempting to block things. but him trying to slide off into a delay route against a team that's not going to be bringing pressure. Purdue may bring pressure, but not like what Western Michigan tried to throw at us. You're basically having to man up everyone in the secondary, and if you get that delay, that could open a lot of space underneath, and that might be something they're looking to exploit.
Well, we might as well get into it. But before we get into it, Andy, you know about this part of the time. Why don't we tell us about our friends at Home Field?
Home Field Apparel, makers of all your fun things. Warm, cozy, fuzzy, old school, vintage, comfortable. Whatever adjectives you want to use that are positive when you refer to a t-shirt, a hoodie, a jogger, a sweatshirt, Home Field is probably going to fit that word because they are just a great brand based out of Indianapolis who make the finest vintage clothing for all your favorite college teams. Steve is rocking, if you're watching us on the Twitch stream, he is watching the vintage NDSU. Let's go FCS. I was earlier today rocking the vintage Cuse dad hat that they make. They have a lot of fun things. And if you would like to take part in this fun home field tradition that we have, use promo code NUNES23, NUNES23, for 15% off your first order at Home Field Apparel. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. I was rocking the Syracuse 1959 National Championship t-shirt this Saturday while I was hosting a bunch of friends for the game. Multiple people asked me, where did you get that shirt? Who is making a shirt for the 1959 Syracuse football team? The answer is Connor and his sicko friends who will make a t-shirt for anything good that your school ever did. He's kind of awesome like that. You should definitely take advantage of that with the promo code NUNES23 for 15% off your first order. They also happen to have a very extensive Purdue collection because of the aforementioned Indiana-ing of their home base and their location. And I think I believe Connor and the crew are hardcore IU fans, so they will go boiler down. We are united this week as Syracuse and Indiana are aligned on the anti-Purdue chart. But as I kind of mentioned earlier, opening line is Syracuse -1 at some books. I think that you're going to see some fluctuation on that. It feels weird, but also if you look at the advanced metrics, Purdue lost to Fresno State at home. They only beat what people expect to be a bad Virginia Tech team by 7 on the road after a 6-hour lightning delay.
After a monsoon.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually know anything conclusive about Syracuse. We know that Purdue is pretty much your bellwether 5-7, 6-6 team. And going on the road, it is going
Syracuse.
to be, well,
that's not us.
Well, here's the thing. I have been on the bandwagon for Syracuse 8-4. I am not getting off of that bandwagon, even with the Oronde Gadsden bad ankle. However,
ankles.
Yep. I still have to mentally recalibrate the fact that it's not the one ankle; it's the two ankles. I think if you objectively look at this game, Syracuse has the better skill position matchups at every position. Like when you go cornerback versus wide receiver, I think Syracuse's defensive backs are better than Purdue's wide receivers. I think Syracuse's wide receivers are better than Purdue's defensive backs. I think Syracuse's backfield is better than the linebackers, yada, yada. The only area where you can't say that Syracuse definitively has an advantage is in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And if there is one thing that can equalize out a game, it's the trenches in a road game. It's like a 7:30 NBC kickoff, so don't worry about getting your streaming option. It is big time NBC here. It is also the Purdue family weekend, so it is a sold out game. It will be a Purdue crowd. This is one of those games where I would really like the Syracuse offensive line to do that thing where they, for 4 quarters, all of a sudden perform like it's nobody's business, a la Clemson in 2017. Like, we've seen it happen before where they just miraculously gel for one game and one game only. But It
Yeah.
is
It's usually anytime they put step on the field against Clemson. Some ungodly reason.
See, Andy, the problem with your thesis and dissertation is that in order for Syracuse's offensive line to step up, it requires Syracuse to have said offensive line.
Correct. See prior rant. So Andy, how long have we been doing the show for?
Oh, I mean, we did it during the pandemic season, so pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So at least once in our career doing this show, I would love to just have an offensive line that sucks less than, well, just doesn't suck. Doesn't completely suck. That's all I'm asking for. Just give me a baseline. And like, it's not like we have a lot of talent on this offensive line right now. And that's the weird thing is it's like this weird amalgamation of people that don't know how to play with each other yet. And then we end up in this situation. Like we've had lines that are just bad. This one I don't think is bad. I think we just haven't figured the personnel out and we don't have healthy bodies, which is
I think what it is, it's another copy and paste of the last two lines, which is your left tackle is pretty good. Probably going to get drafted. Your center is actually kind of solid. Probably won't get drafted, but he'll hold his own. Everyone else is like,
right. Now, if we get Kalen Ellis back and are able to switch Bleish over to the right where he actually looks more comfortable and maybe do something.
Doesn't jump the gun.
Right. And then
doesn't do what the Kansas City right tackle did.
Yeah. Or what he's done 4 times.
That's NFL rules, Christian. He can totally do that.
What, play a slot receiver like Chris Collinsworth said?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the heir apparent to Aaron Service has appeared, and his name is Chris Bleish. But
I will not stand for that.
You won't stand, or you won't take a 15-yard penalty for that.
Oh.
Penalty declined. Replay. Second down.
Yeah, I think it's really apparent that we talked about it last year a lot with the new offense that Ane and Beck were trying to install, where it was really clear that the offensive line was not used to the timing of the motion set offense. That excuse does not carry over into a second year, but it's really clear that they are trying to do a lot of timing-based things. And for whatever reason, there are just certain guys on this team who seem unable to be managing both like calling out protections and also working within the timing of the motion offense. And I think that is something where, you know, Steve, again, going back to the days where it was just you and me and we were early on talking about this, we saw Dino go through a shift with his offensive lineman where he stopped trying to get the 280-pound, you know, agile Oregon type of lineman. And he was firmly in the camp of like, if I can get a big guy who can play, like I will get a big guy who can play. And I feel like across the board, and again, this is me talking about offensive line in a way that I'm probably not qualified to do so, but I feel like being an offensive lineman now, like it's just an evolution of the position in the same way that so many other positions on the field have had to evolve. Like as an offensive lineman, defenses are going to be doing a lot more complicated looks. Like they're just not going to be like sprinting ears pinned back at a specific gap and you call out what if they're going into the gap or not. You also have to be aware of all the motioning that's happening behind you, and there's timing that goes into these plays. It's just become a much tougher job to do, and you'd almost rather have a player who's either undersized or less experienced, but more comfortable in that system than have a guy who's experienced playing a very traditional way. And again, like this sounds like subtext for like me saying that we should be pulling X, Y, or Z guys out. It's just more of a situation where I think we're watching a transition happen among the player pool that Syracuse has to work with. And we've seen in the past that Dino has been rewarded by going younger, by going more inexperienced, but was somebody who's far more comfortable within the overall system that's taking place around them. And I think Kalen Ellis being hurt does throw a giant wrinkle into this line. And I'm not sure when he's coming back. Like Mike, I have I know Garrett Schrader had the quote, but I don't know how confident other people are in that. But I feel like Kalen Ellis is somebody who, if he was starting on this line, we'd be talking about this unit a whole lot differently.
You did literally say a giant hole, and well, it's Ellis. Also,
Yeah.
for the record, and Mike, I didn't mean to interject, but I have to point out that like a tear almost came to my eye. Like after all these years, Andy, you've officially made it.
You're welcome, Steve.
Mike, welcome to the Hive Mind.
Do I want to be here?
You're here, but whether you're by choice or not.
Right. You consciously said, yes, I will come on the show.
Yeah, that I did. Anyway, Ellis. All I can say with him is that I saw him during the middle of the first week of class. He had a brace on his calf. I have not seen or heard from him since, so that's all we got right now.
How about we lighten this mood up with numbers? Or maybe not, because you could take these numbers in very different ways. Our good friend at our former SB Nation colleague, Bill C., now working at ESPN, always puts out his great SP Plus charts every week. And they were updated this morning. Purdue is sitting at 61. For those who haven't looked in the Slack yet, where is Syracuse?
I looked in the Slack, so I can't answer.
I'm going to guess that they're somewhere in the 40s.
Mike, how about you?
I mean, I did look in the Slack, so can I say it or?
I will break it to Andy that Syracuse is sitting at a cool 28 in the SP Plus.
What?
And this is Andy's reaction because for years he's been championing Bill's rankings and what this all does. So if you can't see the actual visual on this, I think we broke Andy.
This is supported by a 44 ranking, a very on brand in the offense, a 27 ranking in the defense, and somehow an 8 in the special teams.
Sure. Was that all Jack Stonehouse's punts?
All 2 of them?
We don't need Craig
for the first time in probably this podcast's short history, Andy is lost for words.
Yeah. Okay.
Steve, I'm about to say something that's going to make your brain hurt. Are we watching the 2014 Doug Marrone team all over again? Like the team that was actually very good, but the schedule kind of screwed them, and they ended up finishing 8-4, going to the Pinstripe Bowl, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's a ho-hum Syracuse team," but they, in Bill C's metric, they were a top 20 team. Like,
Yep.
Is that what we're heading towards? Because if that's what's going to happen, I am going to be insufferable online.
That was 2013. You do not want to mix that up for the 2014.
Correct.
No, that was
Sorry.
actually 2012. Because 2013 was Schaefer in the Texas Bowl. 2014 was very, very different.
Yes.
Mm,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yes. The
And
last
also-
Marrone year.
And also, there's no way we're going to the Pinstripe Bowl when we're already playing a game at Yankee this year. So
Oh,
there's that much at least.
Oh,
I've
so
seen
you guys
weirder
did not
things.
see the ESPN Bowl projections from today.
I did.
There is one Kyle Bonanagra who believes that Syracuse is going to play the Gator Bowl against Auburn. Which a Syracuse Auburn rematch in the Gator Bowl. Sean Keeley might come out of retirement and have a expletive Pat Dye shirt ready to be made for everybody in the Syracuse section.
Oh, if that happens, we are having Connor make those shirts because I need that to be comfortable.
This podcast has already gone off the rails, and this is what happens when I join late. I regret nothing.
So Syracuse is 30 plus rankings higher than Purdue and SP plus.
I don't know how, but
So
and then
take a look
what
at
were we?
I said it already.
Purdue
was
right
You're
the-
now.
better than them at everything except the one thing that you kind of need to be good at in football.
Purdue is 61 in offense and 67 in defense.
Huh? At least they're consistent. So I don't know.
What I will say also, looking at the box scores and trying to get a general sense of this Purdue team also, is that the game plan we saw against Western Michigan could also set up the game plan against Purdue, because Purdue's one defensive strength, like Andy mentioned, was in the trenches, which means you're pretty good at stopping the run. So that probably means that Syracuse is going to want to pass a lot.
But are they good at stopping the swing pass?
Oh, you mean that play that infuriated me that we ran with Tucker every time last year, where he just kind of lazily went in motion to the outside and the ball was snapped while Tucker was still going in motion to the outside?
Yeah, that one, but a variation of it that doesn't suck.
Okay.
I was thinking more like, your standard belly, like pass block into a belly and like hit in underneath and give Price some space work and
give a chip and then leak out to the side.
Right. Actually, do things instead of telegraph exactly what you're going to do every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
There's
Siri was confused there.
Yeah, Siri was confused somewhere.
I like, it feels really reductive to say that a football game is going to come down to trench warfare, but like it really
I've been preaching
is
this for years.
but like let's be like
Steve corrupted the site with soccer first, and now he's slowly trying to bring the offensive line in.
But this is where we're at. Like, I think that if Garrett Schrader gets enough time, like, I think that there are weapons that Syracuse has that Purdue can't keep up with. And again, from what we've seen so far of Purdue against Fresno State and against Virginia Tech, it's not like this offense is like last year's offense where they're able to score at will. So you get into a situation where, look, on paper and with the numbers, this feels like Syracuse is the better team. It's just a matter of, those lines. Purdue is bigger on the offensive line than Syracuse is on the defensive line. The offensive line of Syracuse is not performing to the level that they should be performing to the level of. Against Purdue, Purdue's just gonna kind of put bodies in front and push. I am curious if, not necessarily swing passes, Christian, but one of the things that Beck has been carrying over from the NA days has been these pre-snap motions with the intent of getting linebackers to pause a moment before they make a move. I think that, like, if you watched across college football this week, that's what Nebraska was doing really well against Colorado, was that they knew that Colorado was looking for quick outlet passes, and credit to our old friend Tony White, he basically countered Sean Lewis and said, but what if I drop 8? And the answer was, oh, you can't make the quick read. And I wonder if you're Syracuse and Purdue is going to kind of be the opposite. You're just running a bunch of motion stuff with Donovan Brown and Damian Alford and LaQuint Allen, and you're just getting guys moving across the line and saying, like, look, either halt your blitz or I'm going to dump it to this guy in space and get 3 to 10 yards. Your choice. And I feel like that's an oversimplification of the game plan, but at the same time, it's something that we've seen Beck be very willing to run, and they've been setting up looks for that all season.
Now, this analogy is going to sound weird, but bear with me. Is this a game where we need Garrett Schrader to be more like Eric Dungy and less like Tommy DeVito?
Don't get hurt.
Without the getting hurt part.
I don't know if you can have one without the other.
Try.
That's just a Syracuse quarterback thing in general. So
You could have
If
just
we're
said
talking-
Syracuse and just leave it at that.
Fair.
Yeah.
Because
I guess-
we've celebrated the fact that Schrader has kept his eyes downfield when he scrambled out of the pocket, and because for good reason. I think what we saw last year and the years before, was Schrader was too quick to scramble and too quick to tuck and run. And this year he's keeping his eyes downfield a lot, where he's only rushed 3 or 4 times per game. However, his legs are an asset for a reason. And so if Purdue is actually going to do that Tony White thing of counter motion with coverage, then why not have Schrader take a go at a linebacker who he probably, in his mind, at the very least, knows that he can outrun and outjuke? I'm actually curious what were his stats were last year against Purdue, because this will give us a good indication of what Syracuse might want to try into.
Yeah, I'm intrigued here because I think that there's a non-zero chance this game ends up being a shootout in some way, shape, or form. And I think Syracuse can hang in that game. But if this is a situation where Purdue does get into the backfield pretty consistently, and they do so by bringing extra men and not just having 3 or 4 guys overwhelm the 5 guys that Syracuse has on the line, I wouldn't hate seeing Schrader rip off a couple of those big runs that he's done before to keep teams honest. Like, this kind of spiritually, like, this game feels like the Virginia Tech game from a couple of years ago. Like, going into a quote-unquote hostile environment, you know the teams are pretty even in the trenches, even though Syracuse might have an advantage everywhere else. And Schrader just needs to use his legs to make plays. Not the worst situation, considering that, you know, he's 2 years older from that moment now, or a year older from that moment now. But I'm still cautiously... Actually, I'm not cautiously. I'm just straight up concerned about a situation where we are actively allowing Garrett Schrader to get hit hard when he is still, quote unquote, recovering from his injury.
So Schrader's stats last year: passing 13 for 29, 181 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 sacks. Rushing 17 attempts, 89 yards gained. So effectively, he rushed 15 times and gained 89 yards. So you have to believe that at some point in some affect opened up the field for Schrader to, at least in general, lead that game-winning drive at the end of that game last year. So there is at least that possibility for that exact thing to happen again this year.
Steve, you've been quiet.
I've been looking at a lot of numbers and PFF grades and all sorts of weird things, and trying to figure out anything about this Purdue game. And I can't figure the Syracuse team out. I can't figure this Purdue team out. So I don't know how or what or where to go from there. It seems like, I don't know. It's a conundrum at this point between everything we're seeing on the Syracuse side and then, like, the entirety of what Purdue has done on PFF looks like a just amalgamation of whatever. So here we are in week 3 and still know nothing about this team.
There is nothing more Syracuse than that.
Like we have 100 and something points of offense, and we have given up 7, and we're talking like this. Like, I don't know. It's Syracuse, I guess. Is that the only definition or only response?
Yep.
Sounds about right.
I don't love it any more than you clearly do, but I think a lot across the ACC, we saw that this week was the like proof of concept game for a lot of teams. This feels like the proof of concept game for Syracuse. Like, I would not be surprised if this game comes down to whoever has the ball last. I would not be surprised if Syracuse wins this game by 10 plus points. I would not be surprised if Syracuse loses this game by 10 plus points. Like, I think all of these, like, I think the range of outcomes is a plateau. Like, it's just all kind of equally likely that it all happens. And this game will show us, is Syracuse a top half of the ACC cul-de-sac team? Like, are they in that tier of teams that is nowhere near as good as FSU and UNC, but could beat Pitt or Clemson because those teams just aren't nearly as good this year? Or are they in that middle class of team where it's like, look, you're 6-6 and how you get there is going to be weird, but you're going to be 6-6? Or are they going to be down with Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech where you're probably going to be lucky if you get to a bowl game, and in reality you're somewhere along the 4-8 train? Like,
At least we're not Boston College.
Point.
Yes.
Also, you were talking about the UNC team that needed double overtime to beat Appalachian State, right?
To be fair, that game should have never gone to overtime because of kickers, but kickers are part of the team, so fair.
All I'm saying is that Brady Tenenberg's not missing that kick.
Right. Like, again, I would like to remind everybody that in 2018, that the year that Syracuse was good, SP Plus did not love them, but it loved their special teams. It had Syracuse as a top 5 special teams team in the country. And it's because they had a kicker that did not miss gimme kicks, which apparently puts you in the top 90% of college kickers. And the punting and return game was enough to consistently win the field position battle. And I think we've seen that so far with this team. Again, Purdue is going to be a different test than Western Michigan and Colgate, but
jury's still out on return.
I think the jury's still out, but I think the Purdue game will give us a better, again, proof of concept. What do we got here? Because when Pena comes back, the return game will be great. What can you do without him?
And do you hand the reins to Donovan Brown?
Yeah,
he's fast and shifty. We like fast and shifty.
And he did not fumble twice this past weekend.
Also that's
very,
very valid.
Very, very, very important.
Yeah. You know who else didn't fumble? The Syracuse soccer team.
Hey.
Holding serve against a number 7 visiting Louisville Cardinals team. Yes, Christian, they did basically lose it in the soccer equivalent of stoppage time.
That's what I'm saying.
They were up 2-1 until the last minute and a half, I believe. I think it was an 88th minute goal. But overall, this team, you can still tell, is figuring itself out 100% from a bunch of transfers coming in, and still being able to look the better team for just about the entire game against the number 7 team in the country. I think we're in for the real deal again, boys.
How likely do we see another run the table season for Syracuse where they win the ACC and they're in the national title conversation? Are we at that level?
You know what this honestly might turn into? A repeat of last year, where the swing game is Clemson.
Always. For some reason, Syracuse and Clemson is always the stupid soccer game that means too much and is always way too good of a game. Every single year.
Neat.
So,
I'm really getting annoyed of hearing about how Clemson is an important game for Syracuse sports.
Well, we did
Hey, guess what we get to talk about next year?
Well,
How the important team for Syracuse soccer is now Stanford.
Yep. Because when we thought the ACC was a meat grinder, guess what? We got more meat to grind.
Let's add let's add the school whose basic directive is, oh, the Director's Cup. Let's win that.
Right. Hey, at least we got him in lacrosse.
Hey, I'll actually give him a few years.
Yeah, fair.
Stanford really does need a men's lacrosse program.
No, they'll be good at it. We don't need another good lacrosse program to take away players that Syracuse thinks that they can just have show up on campus and be great. Anyways, that's my lacrosse take. We're not getting into that yet.
We'll make
Not that time of the year.
We'll make sure Greg got in when that happens.
That's in about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. You know what's not in a few 4 or 5 months? Syracuse football playing Purdue this Saturday night, NBC 7:30. We will be back here Sunday night next week to recap whatever the heck happens in that game. I am very scared. I think we are all a little bit nervous and scared, and it's gonna be a fun week on the site. Again, like Steve said, we should be bringing it back at some point in time this week with our Purdue friends from Fans First Sports Network. Looking forward to that preview. But gentlemen, I know I showed up late here, but I feel like we covered our 2 directives: football and football. Am I missing anything?
No, it seems like we hit it.
Then thank you so much for listening to Dos Loyal Idiots, a Fans First Sports Nation podcast. We again really appreciate your support. If you are listening on your podcast platform of choice, make sure that you like and subscribe to Trick the Ottoman Empire. Trick the AI into expanding the Ottoman Empire. There we go. Make sure that
it's fine.
Yeah, it's all an evil empire in some way, shape, or form. Make sure that if you are watching us on Twitch, we do this live most nights, Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you like and subscribe over there so that way you can see all of our fun facial reactions when we find out how high Syracuse is ranked in SP+, or how low Syracuse is ranked in SP+. It goes both ways. And if you are watching this or listening to this on our sister site, newsmagician.com, we again really appreciate the support. Really appreciate you continuing following us as we break out on this great adventure with our new friends. And as always, thank you to Home Field Apparel, who's sponsoring us and continues to sponsor us. Use promo code NUNES23, NUNES23, for 15% off your first order. Gentlemen, the Syracuse Orange is 2-0 and not getting any hype from the big national media, but from our friends and Stats Nerds Corners. If they win this week...
You missed that we're 18 in the FPI?
Well, FPI is for nerds only, Steve. It's the same people that use QBR. Only nerds use those things. When we start getting ranked in the AP polls, that is when we turn on the insufferable meter to 10. Actually,
9 votes in the coaches poll. 9.
Actually, we turn it to 44, and then we go obnoxious level. But until then, we will continue to play the disrespect card. We are the orange team that is disrespected. Go Orange.
Go Orange.
Go Orange.
Go Orange.